Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide made their entrance today to Atlanta for SEC Media Days. Alabama, the favorites to win the SEC and the national championship. They have an embarrassment of riches on both sides of the ball, and Saban knows it. They've got Bryce Young, the Heisman Trophy winner last year, on offense. They've got Will Anderson Jr., who might be the best overall player on defense.
Well, I don't like to compare players, but to have two players that make such a significant impact on our team as those two guys, I don't recall ever having a circumstance like that. We've had some great impact players, but never one on offense, one on defense of, the caliber that these guys have been able to play on a consistent basis. But I think probably bigger than that is the impact that they have on the players around them. These guys set a great example. They're players that other people on our team can emulate in a positive way because of the example that they set. These guys are very serving to their teammates in terms of, they really do care about helping other people for their benefit. So these guys have not only been great players, they've contributed from a leadership standpoint probably as significantly as any leaders that we've had, and we've had some really good leaders in our program and our organization. So really excited about having these guys on our team. You couldn't ask for two better people. I've always said that when the best players on your team are really good people with great attitude and great mindset, it's really helpful to develop in the kind of team chemistry that you need to have a successful team.
Both Young and Anderson in the top 10 of the latest Heisman odds. Young plus 375 behind only C.J. Stroud, the quarterback at Ohio State. Will Anderson Jr., 40-1 to win the Heisman, the only defensive player you'll see here in the top 10. Our Dennis Dodd and Barrett Sallee with the biggest questions for several SEC teams who have already met the media this week, Alabama included. And Dennis, Alabama seemingly has it all, both sides of the ball. But as you pointed out earlier today, Bryce Young was on his back a lot last season.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for Alabama is keeping him clean this season. Alabama gave up 41 sacks last year. 2 years ago, they were number one in the SEC, giving up only 12. And that's with an All-American high draft choice, Evan Neal at left tackle. And they're trying to rebuild a little bit of that offensive line. They've got to keep him clean because I don't think it'll be as easy this year.
No, it won't be as easy. And I think they've done some things to address it. They brought in a new offensive line coach. They got Tyler Steen, a graduate transfer from Vanderbilt. They have 3 returning offensive linemen. The question is, are they any good? Because in the spring game 2 years ago, we saw a problem. It was a huge problem last fall. It was a problem in the spring game this year. You don't want to take too much away from what happens in spring practice, but this is a trend for Alabama. And quite honestly, Bryce Young doing what he did last year behind that group is a minor miracle. So there's no doubt if Alabama's going to be a championship caliber team this year, it's all on the offensive line.
Continuing on with the biggest questions for the teams that have already met the media at SEC Media Days, let's go to LSU. Brian Kelly and company met the media yesterday. And Barrett, it's got to be that quarterback battle, and Brian Kelly insists it is completely up for grabs.
Yeah, Chris, I don't even consider it a quarterback battle. I consider it a quarterback luxury because you've got 4 guys that can start. Brian Kelly is confident in all 4. Jayden Daniels, I think, is the front runner. 3 years at Arizona State. Granted, one of those was the COVID year when they only played 4 games, but he's a runner. He's really the only one out of these 4 who can run the football. And if you go back to 2014, every single quarterback for a Brian Kelly offense has rushed for over 200 yards in a season. Jayden Daniels is the only one that can provide that. But Miles Brennan, in the short time he's been a quarterback at LSU, has had success. Trouble staying on the field. The injuries obviously are a question, but he can stretch the field deep, probably the best out of all 4 of them. They're really high on Garrett Nussmeier. They also are very high on Walker Howard. So it's not a quarterback problem. It's a quarterback luxury. And I think Brian Kelly understands that he's put his team in a good spot.
Yeah, I think they're going to playing both. I think Miles Brennan is going to play. I hesitate to call him a proven commodity, but in year 6, he deserves that shot. He's He's had all those injuries. He deserves a shot. Jayden Daniels runs the ball better than probably any of them, as you mentioned. And I think they need that, philosophy or that dynamic to that offense. So I can see Brian Kelly playing both. And the problem with Jayden Daniels is, in year 4, I don't think he is a proven commodity. There's a reason he transferred. Well, Arizona State's got its own problems. But you look at that body after 4 years, he's got a potential to be ragdolled by these defenses in the SEC. But if he's a spot player, runs the ball, loosens up defense, I think this quarterback position could be really, profitable for LSU.
Different story at the quarterback position for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Matt Corral is off to the NFL. What's the biggest question for Lane, Dennis?
Well, I think just the transfer portal, is this a stopgap or a philosophy? This is a question that's probably being asked across the country with a lot of teams. Coaches have staked their reputations on it, and some of them are in trouble already. Lane did a great job retooling the roster, flipping it, much like Lincoln Riley did after a great 10-win season last year. But Jackson Dart comes in. There's going to be a competition for that job. He keeps stressing. Zach Evans, the running back from TCU, and then Jalen Robinson, the guys I highlight, the receiver from UCF, are the main guys. But what is he going to use this every year? Because they're Ole Miss, they don't have access to the best players all the time, or is this a stopgap?
Yeah, I think this is Lane Kiffin's new philosophy because he wants Ole Miss to be the Oklahoma of the SEC. And what I mean by that is the Oklahoma from the latter Bob Stoops years, early Lincoln Riley years, where it's the most explosive offense in the country. Defense, you'll figure it out on the fly. And I think if he hits the transfer portal hard every single year, that he can accomplish that because he's going to attract a lot of players who want to play in that kind of offense. I mean, you look at this year, we just highlighted those 3. Michael Trigg, a hybrid wide receiver tight end, could be the most important player on that roster. And then Ulysses Bentley, a running back from SMU, is going to be a nice compliment to Zach Evans. So I think for Ole Miss, this is the new identity. They do not have the resources to recruit with Alabama, with Georgia, with LSU, with Florida, with Auburn, but they do have the resources to make themselves attractive to transfers, and I think that's going to be a trend.
That's what Shane Beamer did at South Carolina. They've got their quarterback now in Spencer Rattler. Barrett, what's their biggest question moving forward into this season?
Yeah, which Rattler are you going to get, right? Because I think from a physical standpoint, the tools are there. We've seen it at Oklahoma. He can stretch the field deep, but there's been a little bit of an attitude issue at times. There's some concern whether he's in it for himself or in it for the team, dating all the way back to QB1, the documentary on Netflix. And from what we've been told and what we heard today, especially from guys like the Carrion Joyner, who's been around this Gamecock program for a very long time, he fit right in. He stepped right in, has become just one of the guys, and I think for Spencer Rattler, just being one of the guys is actually the most important part of his progression as the South Carolina quarterback. We know he can sling it. We know he's got a good offensive line. And I think for Rattler, if he can be maybe not what he was at Oklahoma, that's asking a lot with a supporting cast that isn't as talented. But if he can come close to that, they're going to contend in the SEC East.
Yeah, I went out and visited him this summer at his home in Arizona and asked him those questions like, can you be the guy? And I think the biggest thing with him this year is there's nobody named Caleb Williams behind him.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason we heard those boos. It wasn't because he had 2 cars in NIL. It's because he wasn't quite what Caleb Williams was going to be. We didn't know. He's pretty good, obviously. That Spencer Rattler isn't there. He's going to run more of a pro-style offense under Spencer Rattler. Not much, under Sender a little bit more, but I saw him diagram a play for some campers while I was out there. And there were 13 numbers, letters strung together into play, like your typical NFL play. He told me at Oklahoma, where they run the air raid, under Mike Leach, who invented it, they had a play called 6. But he's buying into it. He loves it. He's been told that this will get you ready for the NFL because it's more of an NFL, study out there at South Carolina. Who wouldn't take a quarterback on the rebound who completes 70% of his passes and is 15-2 in his career? South Carolina would.
Yep.
We're talking question marks for the teams that have met the media at SEC Media Days, and it was nothing but questions today for Mississippi State head coach Mike Leach. He was the only coach to go up there in front of the media and not give an opening statement. He just said, bring on the questions. And Dennis, you had some for him today. You spoke with him. What's his biggest question mark going into the season?
Well, at some point, we had him on camera just now, and at some point you've got to talk about football, but I led into it by talking about the recent grizzly sightings and buffalo gorings in Wyoming. So that got him going talking about football. Look, he's Mike Leach. It's basically all offense at Mississippi State. The defense has been surprisingly good, actually. They've got some dudes over there on defense. But We know how he's going to operate. The biggest question is they need to go to a bowl game, and they really need to beat Ole Miss, because if not, then all of a sudden in year 3 he's under pressure. As much as as colorful as he is, if Lane gets him again, there's going to be an issue.
There will be, and I think he came to Starkville with a bunch of hoopla, and rightfully so. He's done a great job wherever he's gone, but I think this was the grand experiment, right? Does this air raid, is it a real deal offense that can succeed anywhere, or is it a gimmick? And with those wide splits on the offensive line, with really no semblance of a running game to speak of, is that going to fly week in and week out in the SEC? And it hasn't so far. And you're right, the game with Ole Miss, the Egg Bowl, I think is the most heated rivalry in all of college football. Yeah, Iron Bowl, yeah, Army-Navy, I get it. You go to Mississippi, you talk to those folks. It's a different world out there. So I think Mike is going to win his fair share of games. That's what he does, right? It's one of those offenses, and he's one of those coaches that he'll jump up and get you. Like, no matter who you are, he'll jump up and get you. But he might suffer a couple of losses where you're like, dude, I don't know if this is going to work out. If he doesn't beat Ole Miss this year, those questions are going to pop up again.
And real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
Chris, I wanted to add, in the SEC with elite athletes in the secondary in the SEC, that offense has struggled against teams that have dropped 8. Still hasn't figured that out. That's the best way to slow that offense down. You can do it in the Big 12. You can do it in the Pac-12, but against elite athletes in the SEC, when they drop 8, there's not many windows.
Nope.
No Grizzlies down in Starkville, though. Don't need to worry about that. Let's go up to Columbia, Missouri, and they've got a quarterback battle up there as well. Barrett, it's a bunch of young guys, a 4-star freshman, and then there is a 7th-year super-duper senior, Jack Abraham, who transferred in from Southern Miss.
Yeah, Jack Abraham's collecting pension. He's got an AARP card at this point. The dude's been around, but he's been successful, very successful at Southern Miss. Went to Mississippi State last year, didn't see the field. So now he's in the SEC again at Missouri, a place that has an opening. His ceiling is not where I think Eli Drinkwitz wants it to be or needs it to be, but the experience helps. I think the upside for a guy like Brady Cook, who did play last year in place of Connor Bazelak, who left to go to Indiana, I think they're very happy with where he is. And so I think the question is, do you want to make sure that you're in good hands, or do you want a difference maker? Because playing it safe is tailor-made for Jack Abraham. If you want a difference maker, it's probably Brady.
Yeah, I worry about Eli Drinkwitz in this respect. Name a quarterback who was in the portal this year. Eli Drinkwitz went after him. Didn't get one, or got the Southern Miss guy. But he didn't get the ones he wanted. That included Jayden Daniels. That included JT Daniels. He didn't get those guys. You did get the #1 receiver in the country, Luther Burden.
Yep.
If you don't have a guy to get him the ball, that impacts the program going forward. So they've got to come up with somebody that is a difference maker, and I don't know if I see one on that roster.
Let's move to the last team. We kept them last because they've been last for a long time, the Vanderbilt Commodores. But Clark Lee, the head coach, making some news today. Barrett, I know, but you tweeted it out, the comment that he made today, which is, quote, "We know in time Vanderbilt football will be the best program in the country." Do with that what you will.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, Vandy's got some issues. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well, I think that, if you boil it down, you can boil it down to a bunch of things at Vanderbilt. It's team speed, and you can talk about inheriting Derek Mason's players. There was a chronic lack of team speed at Vanderbilt, not a new thing at Vanderbilt. When you were getting beat by an average of 27 points in the SEC and losing all those games, and at a point where Vanderbilt now has gone all in on football, maybe to the most they've ever done in their history, the football program has to measure up. And I'm talking about facilities upgrades and everything else. They're going all in on football. Now they have a good football team. They got to get some players.
Yeah, and Mike Wright is a guy I was really impressed with today, the quarterback. He was named the starting quarterback after spring. Played a little bit last year after Ken Seals got hurt. And to Ken's credit, he stuck around. And that's a really solid 1-2 punch. A great job by Clark Lee to convince Ken Seals to say, hey, look, your time could be now. But Mike Wright, I think, is very interesting. He told me with a sly grin when I asked him about how much running will be involved out of the quarterback position. He said, a little bit. I think that means a lot because I think, look, Vandy is not going to out-athlete anybody, but it can out-scheme some people. And if you have a quarterback like Mike Wright who can throw the ball, we saw that last year, and can run the ball effectively, it at least gives you a puncher's chance. So I'm actually excited to see Vanderbilt this year because I still believe in Clark Lee. It's a terrible job It's a terrible, terrible job. But he's a Vandy guy. He knows those challenges, and I think he's getting the right players.
All right, things looking up in Nashville. A lot's changed since COVID started. Not the Vanderbilt SEC losing skid. They have not won since 2019. Barrett Sallee and Dennis Dodd from SEC Media Days here on HQ. Alabama's the favorite to win it. Then it's Georgia right behind. A pretty steep drop down to Texas A&M with the third shortest odds, and then jump off a cliff down to Tennessee and everybody else at 40-1 or longer. Vanderbilt's about $1 trillion to 1.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.